New York had already been divided, and the men who ruled it believed the system was complete. The borders were set, the hierarchy was respected, and the silence was absolute. What most Americans could not see was that this criminal empire did not survive because of violence alone, but because it mastered something far more effective: psychological control. Power in the Mafia's world did not come from guns on the street, but from obedience in private. It came from men who learned slowly and deliberately that survival depended not on strength or intelligence, but on submission. And that submission was not forced overnight. It was cultivated patiently until it became instinct. Most men did not enter the Mafia believing they were joining a criminal organization. They believed they were accepting help, a favor offered at the right moment, protection when no one else was willing to intervene. In immigrant neighborhoods where the law felt distant and unreliable, the Mafia presented itself as order in the middle of chaos. It settled disputes quickly, it enforced agreements, it punished betrayal. And for many young men growing up surrounded by poverty and uncertainty, that system appeared more real and more reliable than any distant courthouse or police station. The trap was subtle. By the time a man understood what he had aligned himself with, he had already benefited from it, and that debt could never be repaid. Progress within the organization was slow by design. Loyalty had to be proven repeatedly, not through speeches or promises, but through action and restraint. A man was tested not only on what he did, but on what he did not say. Silence under pressure was more valuable than bravery. The Mafia had no use for men who needed recognition. It thrived on those who understood that survival depended on being invisible. Orders were rarely explained. Questions were discouraged. Obedience without context was the expectation. A man who hesitated revealed doubt. A man who doubted became a liability. When a man was finally initiated, the ritual made one truth unmistakably clear: there was no turning back. Blood was drawn not as a symbol of violence, but as a permanent marker. The burning image in the hand was not ceremony, it was a warning. From that moment forward, his identity was no longer his own. His name, his future, even his death belonged to the family. Loyalty was not conditional, it was total. And betrayal was not punished as a crime. It was erased as if the traitor had never existed. Inside the organization, hierarchy governed every interaction. Authority flowed downward, never up. At the top sat the boss, insulated from risk and often from visibility. Beneath him, the underboss enforced discipline and managed daily operations, while the consigliere served as strategist and mediator. Below them were the capo regimes, each controlling a crew, each operating like a local ruler within a larger kingdom. And at the bottom were the soldiers, the most visible, the most vulnerable, and the most expendable. These were the men who collected debts, enforced threats, committed violence, and absorbed the consequences. They were the backbone of the system and the first to be sacrificed when pressure mounted. Very few would ever rise beyond that level. The structure was intentionally narrow at the top. Advancement existed just enough to keep hope alive, but rarely enough to be achieved. The promise of future power was one of the organization's most effective tools. Men endured years of risk, fear, and obedience, believing that loyalty would one day be rewarded. Meanwhile, real power remained concentrated in the same hands, generation after generation. Money flowed constantly through this machine, but it was never free. Every operation fed the hierarchy above it. Gambling, extortion, labor unions, construction contracts, shipping docks, transportation networks. Each industry became another artery pumping wealth upward. A share went to the capo, another to the boss, and another to officials who ensured that investigations stalled and indictments disappeared. What remained for the soldier was carefully calculated. Enough to live well, but never enough to walk away. Wealth, like fear, was controlled. And fear was everywhere. Not the loud, dramatic fear of street violence, but the quiet fear that settled into the mind. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of speaking at the wrong moment. Fear of interpreting an order incorrectly. Many commands were never spoken outright. A suggestion, a glance, a silence could be enough. A man was expected to understand. Asking for clarity was interpreted as weakness or suspicion, and weakness was dangerous. Over time, the Mafia no longer needed to threaten its members. The discipline became internal. Men learned to anticipate punishment before it was delivered. They adjusted their behavior automatically. They monitored their own words. This was the organization's greatest success: control without constant force. By the time a man realized he was no longer free, the idea of escape no longer felt realistic. There was no retirement in this world, no resignation. A man could be sidelined, reduced in influence, or ignored, but he could never leave. The knowledge he carried made him a permanent risk. The only true exit was death, and that reality hovered constantly, unspoken but understood by all. Many remained not because they wanted to, but because the alternative was unthinkable. For decades, this system functioned almost flawlessly. The public remained unaware. Federal authorities denied its existence, and those inside believed the structure was untouchable, protected by tradition, secrecy, and fear. But every organization built on silence shares the same vulnerability. It depends on absolute obedience forever, and eventually pressure accumulates, paranoia grows, trust erodes, and someone somewhere begins to talk, not out of heroism but out of survival. When that moment arrived, it did not simply expose crimes. It shattered the illusion that this empire was invisible. And once the silence was broken, it could never be restored.